Imagine a peaceful Canadian neighborhood where everyone knows each other. Children ride their bicycles without fear. Parents leave their front doors unlocked. It seems like the last place where something truly evil could happen. But on one quiet October afternoon, a 9-year-old girl vanished. There were no screams. No witnesses who saw exactly what happened. No obvious suspect. Just a bicycle, an empty road, and a family that would spend decades searching for answers. Police believed they had solved the crime. An arrest was made. A man was convicted. The case was considered closed. But years later, modern DNA technology revealed something unimaginable. The man everyone believed was guilty was completely innocent. And the real killer had been hiding in plain sight for more than 3 decades. This is the tragic story of Christine Jessop, one of Canada's most disturbing cold cases. October 3, 1984. October in Ontario had begun to feel colder. Leaves covered the sidewalks. The small community of Queensville was quiet, surrounded by farmland and narrow country roads. It was the kind of place where children often walked alone after school. Parents rarely worried. 9-year-old Christine Jessop was just like any other child. She loved drawing. She enjoyed spending time with friends. She dreamed about growing up one day. Nothing about that Wednesday afternoon suggested history was about to change forever. Christine had been visiting a nearby home where friends lived. It wasn't unusual. The walk back to her family's house was short. A route she already knew. Around mid-afternoon, she started walking home alone. It should have taken only a few minutes. But she never arrived. The family begins searching. At first, no one panicked. Children sometimes stopped to play. Maybe she had gone to a friend's house. Maybe she had taken a different route. But as daylight slowly disappeared, the concern became fear. Her parents started calling neighbors. Friends searched nearby fields. Cars drove slowly through country roads hoping to spot her. Hours passed. Nothing. Soon police were called. By evening, what had started as a missing child report became one of the largest search operations the area had ever seen. Volunteers gathered with flashlights. Police officers searched forests. Dogs followed every possible trail. Helicopters scanned open farmland. Every hour that passed made hope feel smaller. A community living in fear. News spread quickly. Families locked their doors for the first time. Parents refused to let children walk anywhere alone. Schools warned students to stay together. Nobody understood what had happened. Had Christine run away? Had she become lost? Or had someone been watching? Waiting for the perfect opportunity? Investigators considered every possibility. Neighbors were interviewed. Known offenders were questioned. Vehicles reported near the area were investigated. But every lead ended the same way. Nothing. It was as if Christine had simply disappeared into thin air. Days turned into weeks. Hope slowly faded. The discovery. On December 31, 1984, nearly 3 months after Christine vanished, a man walking through a wooded area near Sunderland, Ontario, made a horrifying discovery. Hidden among the trees, he found human remains. Police quickly arrived. Dental records confirmed what Christine's family had feared since the very beginning. It was Christine Jessop. The small town that had prayed for a miracle was now facing something far worse. Investigators determined she had been murdered. The crime shocked Canada. A child had been abducted, taken miles away from home, and killed by someone who had managed to leave almost no useful evidence behind. Whoever committed the crime appeared to know exactly what they were doing. There were very few witnesses. No murder weapon. No clear suspect. And forensic science in 1984 was nowhere near what it is today. Detectives knew solving this case would be incredibly difficult. But they believed they eventually found the right man. Unfortunately, they were about to make one of the biggest mistakes in Canadian criminal history. Cliffhanger. The investigation was about to focus on a quiet local man named Paul Morin. Police believed the evidence pointed directly to him. The media declared they had found Christine's killer. The public demanded justice. But almost everything investigators thought they knew was wrong. The murder that took 36 years to solve Christine Jessop case. For investigators, the pressure was becoming unbearable. A 9-year-old girl had been kidnapped and murdered. Months had passed. The public wanted answers. The media wanted a suspect. And police believed they had finally found one. But what happened next would become one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in Canadian history. A quiet neighbor becomes the prime suspect. Only a few miles from where Christine had lived was a man named Paul Morin. He was 25 years old. He lived alone. He worked as a musician and laboratory technician. Friends described him as intelligent, quiet, and socially awkward. He wasn't married. He kept to himself. To some investigators, those harmless personality traits suddenly seemed suspicious. Police learned that Morin had lived near Christine's neighborhood. He had no violent criminal history. No eyewitness had seen him abduct Christine. No physical evidence directly connected him to the murder. Yet detectives continued focusing almost entirely on him. As more time passed, their investigation narrowed. Instead of asking, who committed this crime? They slowly began asking, how do we prove it's Guy Paul Morin? That subtle difference would change everything. Small details become evidence. Investigators started collecting anything they thought could connect Morin to Christine's death. Neighbors remembered seeing his car. Some witnesses claimed they had seen someone who looked similar. Others weren't sure. Descriptions changed over time. Memories became less reliable. Still, every uncertain statement seemed to strengthen the police theory. Then investigators searched Morin's home. They collected clothing, hair samples, personal belongings, anything that might support their case. But once again, nothing clearly linked him to Christine. No fingerprints, no blood, no weapon, no direct forensic proof. Even so, the investigation kept moving in only one direction: the power of public pressure. By now, the murder dominated headlines across Canada. Parents were terrified. Communities demanded justice. Every day without an arrest increased criticism of investigators. Eventually, police arrested Guy Paul Morin. For many people, the arrest brought relief. They believed the nightmare was finally over. Television reports described him as Christine's killer before a jury had even heard the evidence. Newspapers questioned his strange behavior. His quiet personality suddenly became proof of guilt in the public's eyes. But being different is not the same as being dangerous. The trial. When the case reached court, prosecutors relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. Witness testimony, hair comparison, behavioral assumptions. None of it definitively proved Morin committed the murder. At the time, DNA testing was still in its early stages. The advanced forensic science we have today simply didn't exist. Jurors were presented with scientific evidence that sounded convincing. Experts testified with confidence. To an ordinary jury, it appeared reliable. But years later, many of those forensic methods would be criticized as deeply flawed. Even experienced investigators can make mistakes. And sometimes, science itself evolves. Convicted. Despite serious questions about the evidence, Guy Paul Morin was convicted. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. For Christine's family, it seemed justice had finally arrived. For investigators, the case appeared solved. For the public, the killer was behind bars. But Morin never admitted guilt. Not once. He continued insisting he had nothing to do with Christine's disappearance or murder. Many dismissed those claims. After all, most convicted criminals say they're innocent. Or do they? Cracks begin to appear. As years passed, lawyers and independent experts began reviewing the case. They noticed inconsistencies. Witnesses had changed their stories. Some forensic conclusions appeared overstated. Certain investigative decisions raised serious concerns. Then came something that would completely transform criminal investigations around the world: DNA testing. Unlike older forensic methods, DNA could identify individuals with extraordinary accuracy. Evidence collected decades earlier suddenly had a new purpose. If biological evidence still existed, science could finally reveal the truth. Investigators located preserved evidence from Christine's case. The samples were sent for modern DNA analysis. Everyone expected one outcome: confirmation that Guy Paul Morin was guilty. Instead, the results shocked the entire country. The DNA didn't match him. Not even close. The man imprisoned for Christine Jessop's murder had never been the killer. The innocent man walks free. The conviction collapsed. Guy Paul Morin was officially exonerated. After years of being labeled a child murderer, his name was finally cleared. Canada was stunned. How could such a catastrophic mistake happen? A public inquiry later exposed major investigative failures: tunnel vision, improper handling of evidence, overconfidence in unreliable forensic techniques. The case became a landmark lesson for police agencies across Canada. But one terrifying question remained: if Guy Paul Morin wasn't the killer, Then who was? Because somewhere, the real murderer had escaped justice for years. And he had never been held accountable. For decades, the case went cold once again. The evidence sat untouched in storage. Many believed the real killer would never be identified. But advances in DNA technology were about to uncover a name no one expected. A man who had already died, yet whose secret had remained hidden for over 35 years. The murder that took 36 years to solve, the Christine Jessop case. For more than 3 decades, Christine Jessop's murder remained one of Canada's most haunting unsolved crimes. The man once convicted had been proven innocent. The investigation had failed. The public had lost confidence. And somewhere, the real killer had never faced justice. Many believed the truth had disappeared forever. But evidence has one incredible advantage over memory: it doesn't forget. And after sitting untouched for decades, a tiny piece of biological evidence was finally about to tell investigators what no witness ever could. Science had finally caught up. By the late 2010s, DNA technology had advanced far beyond anything investigators could have imagined in 1984. Evidence that once seemed useless could now reveal answers hidden for decades. The preserved biological samples from Christine's case were examined once again. This time, scientists used modern forensic DNA analysis that was far more accurate than the methods available during the original investigation. Instead of asking investigators to interpret uncertain clues, the DNA spoke for itself. There was no emotion, no assumptions, no pressure, just science. The profile was entered into Canada's national DNA database. Investigators waited. Then, they got a match. A name from the past. The DNA belonged to a man named Calvin Hoover. It was a shocking discovery. Hoover had lived in the same general area as Christine in 1984. He had known members of the Jessop family through local connections. Unlike Paul Morin, he had never become the focus of the investigation. In fact, he had never even been charged with Christine's murder. But there was one heartbreaking detail. Calvin Hoover had died in 2015. 5 years before investigators identified him through DNA. The man responsible could never be questioned. He could never stand trial. He could never explain why he targeted a 9-year-old child. Investigators reopened the timeline. Once Hoover's name emerged, detectives reviewed everything they knew. His movements, his connections, his location in 1984. The evidence fit in ways that had never been fully explored during the original investigation. Most importantly, the DNA recovered from Christine's clothing matched Hoover. Investigators stated that the DNA evidence strongly identified him as the person responsible for the murder. After decades of uncertainty, science had finally pointed to the real killer. A family finally receives answers. In October 2020, Ontario authorities publicly announced the results. For Christine's family, the news brought mixed emotions. There was relief. After 36 years, they finally knew who had taken Christine's life. But there was also sadness. Because justice in a courtroom would never happen. The killer was already dead. No conviction. No sentence. No chance to ask the questions that had haunted the family for decades. Sometimes, solving a mystery doesn't erase the pain. It simply replaces uncertainty with truth. The man who lost everything. As investigators announced Hoover's identification, many people also remembered another victim. Paul Morin. Years of his life had been taken away. He had been publicly labeled a child murderer. He lost his freedom, his reputation, his privacy. Even after his exoneration, the emotional damage could never be completely undone. His case became one of Canada's most significant examples of a wrongful conviction. It led to major reforms in how police investigate serious crimes. It also encouraged greater caution when relying on eyewitness testimony and older forensic techniques without strong scientific support. Lessons from the case. The Christine Jessop investigation changed Canadian criminal justice forever. It showed how easily investigators can develop tunnel vision when they become convinced of a single suspect. It demonstrated why every lead must be tested objectively. And it highlighted the extraordinary value of preserving evidence. Without those carefully stored DNA samples, Christine's murder might never have been solved. A tiny piece of biological evidence, preserved for decades, ultimately succeeded where thousands of interviews, searches, and theories had failed. Closing reflection. When people hear the phrase cold case, they often imagine dusty files forgotten in storage. But every cold case represents something much more personal. A family waiting. a community searching, and victims whose stories deserve to be remembered. Christine Jessop was only 9 years old. She never had the chance to grow up. Her family spent more than 3 decades wondering who had taken her away. The answer finally came. Not because someone confessed. Not because a witness suddenly remembered. But because science refused to give up. Her story is both heartbreaking and hopeful. Heartbreaking because justice came too late to put the killer on trial. Hopeful because it proved that even after decades, the truth can still be found. Sometimes, the smallest piece of evidence carries the biggest secret. And sometimes, time doesn't bury the truth. It simply waits for the right technology to uncover it. If this case surprised you, remember that there are many other cold cases where modern DNA technology has transformed investigations years, or even decades, later. Subscribe for more real mystery stories, unsolved crimes, and forgotten cases that continue to shape criminal investigations around the world. The next mystery might already have been solved, it just hasn't been discovered yet. One detail from the earlier draft should be corrected for factual accuracy. Paul Morin was acquitted at his first trial in 1986, convicted after a second trial in 1992, and exonerated in 1995 when DNA testing excluded him. In 2020, investigators announced that DNA identified Calvin Hoover as the likely perpetrator.